Another week. Another week. Here we go. Okay. What was that?
I said at least.
At least that's true. Okay, let's not plan for past today. Yeah. Okay. So the last thing we had yesterday was our Mishnah said that our Mishnah said that the yitzika, that third pouring of the oil, of course you had to do it, but just if a non-Kohen did it, it's valid. And we said that was in contradiction to the opinion of Rav Shimon that said that a Kohen had to do it. So that we answered, it depended. It depended on the if it's a mincha of a non-Kohen, then a non-Kohen could do the oil pouring. If it was the mincha of a Kohen, then he can't. So that's what we're up to. Towards the bottom of 18b, maybe 6-7 lines from the bottom. The bread. Yeah, we'll see more about it.
Yeah, we'll see more about that.
So I hope can't plan past today, but yeah, it is confusing. Amr le Rav Michti. Rav is going to argue in this and say, Michti, Minchas Kohanim Meheches Rabbi Liatzika. Where did we know the obligation that for a mincha, a flour offering of a Kohen, that you pour the oil in after it's mixed? Right? We had the original oil pouring to measure. Then we had oil and flour together and mix it. That's called belila. And you had yitzika, is that oil pouring after it's mixed together. So how do you know that you have to do that by a flour offering of a Kohen? From minchas Yisrael, from the flour offering of a Jew. If you're learning it from the oil pouring of a non-Kohen's flour offering, and there it's valid if a non-Kohen does the pouring. So too by the flour offering of a Kohen, it's also going to be valid if a non-Kohen does it, arguing on our resolution yesterday. Others say another exchange between Rav Nachman and Rava. Lo kasha, this difficulty, our Mishnah and Reb Shimon about the third oil pouring, can it be done by a non-Kohen or it has to be done by a Kohen? It depends. Kan bin nikmatzos, kan b'shein nikmatzos. It depends if it's a certain flour offering that has kmitza, or offerings that don't have kmitza. So some offerings that just have the oil, or they don't have the kmitza process, but it has the oil, so that's going to be invalid by a non-Kohen. The ones that do have a kmitza will be valid by a non-Kohen. Amrle Rava says, where do you know that the non-kmitza flour offerings need oil? Liyitzika minikmatzos, from the other flour offerings that have kmitza that require oil. Well then, kinikmatzos, it should have the same halacha. Mahasam sheir bazar, apakanamik sheir bazar, elamechaver tamasisim lokrib shimon. Says Rava, if you're learning out from the kmitza offerings, and there the oil can be done by a non-Kohen, so do here can be done by a non-Kohen, and therefore we don't have a resolution. Our Mishnah is against the opinion of Reb Shimon. Can that third oil be done by a non-Kohen or not? Our Mishnah says yes, and Reb Shimon says no. Okay, so now, what is the reasoning of our Mishnah of the rabbis? My time at the Rabbanon Amar Kra. The pasuk says, "V'yatzak Allah Hashem and also le'levona ve'viel b'nei Aaron haKohen v'kamatz." So the preparatory steps to the kmitza, it says you should pour the oil, frankincense, bring it to the b'nei Aaron, bring a Kohen, and then do kmitza. So very clear. Mikmitza ve'elech mitzvahs kahuna. Only from kmitza and onward do we say that you require a Kohen. However, it teaches us about the pouring and the mixing, that those things are done by a non-Kohen. That would be the simplest reading of the verses. In the second chapter of Vayikra, the first two verses, it says all these things, and then it says you bring it to the Bnei Aaron, and then they do kmitza. Sounds like anything before kmitza, before removing of the flour, can be done by a non-Kohen. Simple explanation, simple reasoning. What's the reason for Reb Shimon that a non-Kohen cannot do the oil pouring? Isn't it pretty explicit in the verses that that anything before kmitza can be done by a non-Kohen? Rabbi Shimon says, Bnei Aaron, next page, HaKohanim, Mikra Nidrash Lefanav V'Liachor. So Rabbi Shimon says that there's a way of expounding the verses that when you have a certain detail, it can be expounded on what was before it and what was after it. Which means that in our case, it says Bnei Aaron, the children of Aaron. It says it before the Kmitza. So he understands it to mean whatever came before and whatever's coming after is bound by only the children of Aaron. So even though when you read the verse, it sounds like you do the oil and the frankincense, and then you give it to the Kohen, and he does Kmitza, or they do Kmitza. However, he learns that Bnei Aaron, the children of Aaron, goes on what was before and what was after. What was before? Yitzika, pouring of the oil. What was after? Kmitza. Therefore, these words in the middle of the children of Aaron goes both on what was before it and what was after it, and therefore, even the oil process is required, needs a Kohen to do it. Now, on this, that Reb Shimon says, you can read a verse and it'll go on what was before it or what's after it. We're going to see that he seems to argue on himself. The Savar Reb Shimon, Mikra Darish, Mikra Nidrash, a verse is expounded lefanav on what's before it and what's after it. Well, is that really true? The Hatanya, it says in the Brisa regarding, I think, a regular chatas offering, v'lachach hakon midam chatas be'etzba'o v'nasan al karnas hamizbeach. So the first is the receiving of the blood, and then it says he takes it with his finger and places it on the horns of the altar. So now, v'lachach, so that v'lachach, and he takes melamed shalote kabbalah ela biyamin. So now the word v'lachach is right now going on what was before it, that the receiving has to be also with his right hand. Ela biyamin, the etzba'o, v'nasan melamed shalote nesina ela biyamin. Just like the receiving has to be with his right, so to the placing on the altar has to be with the right. Now that was all the first opinion in the Brisa, not Reb Shimon. Amar Reb Shimon says, "V'chinamar yad b'kabbalah." It doesn't say hand by receiving. Rather, it's talking about here about the. It says finger here, not hand. So you can't tell me that when it says finger, it goes on what was beforehand to talk about the receiving of the blood, which is done by your hand. So v'chinamar yad b'kabbalah, hovil v'lo namar yad b'kabbalah, since it does not say hand by the receiving of the blood in our case, so therefore kibel b'smol kosher. If you accept the blood in the left hand, that's going to be valid. So we have here a pasuk that says you're going to receive the blood. He takes the blood, and then it says with his finger and puts it on the altar. The first opinion held that when it says finger, it's referring always to the right finger, and beforehand was talking about the blood. So therefore, the right hand you have to receive the blood and place the blood. But Reb Shimon doesn't say that. Reb Shimon says that it's only the placing can be done with the right, it has to be done with the right hand, but the receiving can be with the left hand. So you see from here, Reb Shimon does not expound in this kind of way that you go before and after. So. Amar Abai, and Abai said about this debate, that we see here that Rabbi Shimon argues, that they argue about, can you expound things before and after? So to tell me that the reason why Rabbi Shimon said that the pouring of the oil has to be done with a Kohen is because when it says Bnei Aaron, it goes not only on the Kmitza and onwards, but even on the oil pouring beforehand. We see that that's incorrect. Abai told us, and we see that Rabbi Shimon argues on this idea of expounding before and after. So we now are back to the drawing board. We need a new reason for Rabbi Shimon. Ella. So Haki time of the Rabbi Shimon. What's the reason for Rabbi Shimon? It says Vehevia. So in that verse, it says first two verses of the second chapter of Vayikra, that when a person brings an offering, he's going to put the oil on and the frankincense, and he's going to bring it to the Kohen and do Kmitza. And then, so it says that the first verse is the oil pouring. Then it says Vehevia, and he shall bring it to the children of Aaron. Sometimes the Vav can do as follows. Vehevia, Vav Mosif al Inyan Rishon, that the vav is adding. It's adding to the first topic, meaning just like right now we're bringing to the Kohen, the vehevia tells you that even things beforehand have to be brought to have to be done by a Kohen as well. Yeah. So now we have a vav connecting the two psukim to teach you that they are connected. In what way are they connected? That just like verse 2 has to be done by a Kohen, verse 1 has to be done by a Kohen too. Now, is that really true that Rabbi Shimon expounds this way? The suburb of Shimon Vav Mosel in the Rishon, I'll show you. Elameata the Siv. It says by the very beginning of Vayikra of slaughtering the shachat as ben abakar. You're going to slaughter the cattle, the calf. The cattle, right? Young bull. As ben abakar, thank you. Ve'ikribu b'nei Aaron HaKohanim, and you're going to bring it to the Aaron HaKohanim. Es hadam, you're going to bring it to them, the blood, and they're going to take the blood. V'zarku es hadam. So, at what point does the Kohen have to do it? From the receiving of the blood. Mekabala v'helach. Mitzvahs kahuna, melamed al shrita, shiksher bizar. We see from the psukim that you can slaughter it, and then you bring it to the Kohen, because only afterwards does the Kohen's job step in. But the slaughtering can be done by a non-Kohen. Now, if it's true that Rabbi Shimon expounds that whenever you have a vav starting off the next section, it connects the first section, Rabbi Shimon vav mosal in your rishon. So then, shchita hakanani bizar tehei psula. Then you should say that shchita done by a non-Kohen, slaughtering done by a non-Kohen, should also be invalid because the vav connects the two sections, and yet we don't say that. So what do you see? Rabbi Shimon does not expound the vav this way. Says the Gemara, no. Really, he does expound the vav this way, and that is our source for the oil. The reason by slaughtering, why it's valid by a non-Kohen, is for a different reason, such as shiny hasam, the amar kra, v'samach, v'shachat. We juxtapose placing the hands on the animal to the slaughtering of the animal. Who places his hands on the animal? Not the Kohen, the owner. Masmicha bezarim, avshchita bezarim. Just like the placing of the leaning on the animal is done by a non-Kohen, so to the slaughtering is done by a non-Kohen. Now what are we going to ask? Well, if the leaning on the animal is done by the owners, then maybe the slaughtering should be done by the owners as well. And yet we don't find that. So, so the slaughtering should always be done with the owners. So we say, no, hahulo matzis amris. You can't say that the leaning has to be done by the owners. Kal v'chomer. There's a kal v'chomer that's going to prove that that's incorrect. Why? Umazrika, the ikar kapara, just like throwing the blood, sprinkling, the placing of the blood is the primary atonement, and yet lo ba'i bailim, the owners obviously don't do it. It's only the Kohen that does it. Shrita, slaughtering, the lavikar kapara, which is not the primary atonement. Lo kol shekain, for sure, does not require the owners to do it. So at the end of the day, really our vav is a proper way to expound. That is the source for the oil. However, slaughtering has another reason why it cannot be done by a Kohen, because it's juxtaposed to leaning on the animal. Okay. Now, v'chi tema ein done in efshar misha'i efshar. Now, maybe you'll say that what? Maybe you'll say that you can't learn out efshar misha'i efshar, meaning this kal v'chomer is flawed because you can't learn out efshar, meaning something which is possible. Shchita is possible to be done by a non-Kohen from efshar, from the sprinkling of the blood. That's never done by a non-Kohen. So maybe you'll tell me we don't learn things that are impossible from things that are possible. We don't learn things that are possible from things that are impossible, and therefore your kal v'chomer is flawed, and therefore maybe shchita should be done by the owners, and if shchita should be done by the owners, which is not, but maybe it should be, it'll show you that the juxtaposition is incorrect, and therefore we have a question with the vav. So the chitema, maybe you'll tell me, ein danin is a not a good kavachomer efshar slaughtering, which could be done by a non-kohen, from efshar, which cannot be done by a non-kohen. I'll show you Galer Rachmana b'Yom Kippurim. The shachet is parachat asher lo. Special requirement for the Kohen Gadol that the sin offering, the bull that he brings, only asher lo. It's the one that he owns. It's his. He has to slaughter it. Michlal, that everywhere else, the shchita ba'al malobin and violent. Everywhere else, slaughtering does not require ownership, and therefore there's no requirement for the owner to do it, and therefore our juxtaposition is still good to teach you that slaughtering can be done by a non-kohen. And Reb Shimon says, we keep Reb Shimon's teaching that the vav by a second verse connects the two verses, and therefore even the oil has to be poured by a non-kohen. Okay, now we're going to get on to a long discussion, which is going to have something to do with us at some point. So, Amar Rav says like this: Kol makom shenemar Torah v'chuka eino elo la'akev. Any place that it says Torah, which usually means like a subject or a category, v'chuka, chuka is a law. Like it has to be this way. It's a chok. You can't break a chok. It's a law, a statute. Has to be this way. Eino elo la'akev. Whenever it says that, that tells you that every detail in that section is absolutely necessary, and if you're missing even one of those details, that's going to prevent whatever you're trying to do from succeeding. So that's Rav's statement. Now, obviously, we're going to have trouble with it, or else we know Gemara, right? And we know Daf Yomi, and why we here. So ain't a lockage. So yeah. So Sakadaita. And today's Sunday class, we'll find out why you're here. Don't worry.
Oh, okay.
It's gonna be all about okay, you'll find out. No spoiler alert. So Eino Akid. So says the Gemara, 1 second. Does Rav really mean that you have to have both when the words Torah and the words Chukah and not one or the other? I'm gonna show you now. It's gonna say Torah or it's gonna say Chukah, and even one of them should be enough. So let's see. Because Sakadaita Tarti Ba'inon, you think to say that when Rav said you need both, that you need both. Why would you think that? Because that's what it said. That Kidesiv in Parshas Chukas. It says, Sos Chukas HaTorah. That's referring to the red heifer, the Parah Aduma. There it says both. But now I'll show you Simin Natatz Yakmal. So I think about 7 cases where it's not true. And therefore we have to understand what was Rav saying. Bahare Nazir, a Nazir, Delok Sivabe Ela Torah. It says only the word Torah. The Amar Rav, Tinufa benazir ma'akavis. When he finishes his process by, I think, the Shlomim offering, he has to waive it. And Rav said, you must waive it. Not if you don't do it, it's still good. No, it's not good. But it only says Torah, not Torah and Chukah. Says the Gemara, okay, it's not a problem. Shiny Hossam, Keva Neksiv Kein Yasa, Kiman Neksiva Bahu, Chukah Dami. When it says Kein Yasa, it should be done like this. So that makes up for the lack of the word Chukah, statue. It has to be this way. When it says Kenyasa, do it like this, so that tells you it has to be done. It's a preventative. So, okay. So now, okay, but Hare Toda, but a thanks offering, Deloksivabe Ela Torah, by the thanks offering, a Toda, it says only the word Torah, the category. Vitnan, we know there's 40 loaves, 4 different kinds of breads. So, or baked goods, matzahs, thin, wafer-like, yeah. Vitnan, Arba'a minim shebetoda, the 4 different species of the thanks offering. Ma'akven zed. One prevents another. You have to have all of them. And only says Torah. Doesn't say chukah, statue. Oh, shiny Toda, the iskish l'nazir. Yeah, but Toda is compared to a nazir. And nazir, it says kenyasa. And kenyasa is like chok. And therefore, it's not a problem. So where do we find that a thanks offering is compared to a nazir? So as it says, the iskish l'nazir, it's compared to Ksiv al Zevach Toda Shlomav. It says by the Toda al Zevach Todas Shlomav. So on the offering, you're going to bring Todas Shlomav. So it sounds like you're going to bring Shlomav, a peace offering. What is that coming to include? Amar Mar Shlomov l'rabos shalmei nazir, coming to include the sin offering, the peace offering of a nazir. So we see that by the section of the thanks offering, we also include the peace offering of a nazir, which shows that they are compared to teach you that just like a nazir, you have to do exactly as written, or else it doesn't. You have to start again. So too by a thanks offering, it learns from nazir that it has to be all four species of the thanks offering have to be brought, or else it's no good. But really, Rav could still stay strong that so hukas Torah, when it says huka and Torah, therefore it has to be every detail has to be done. Okay, so we had nazir, we had toda. Now we're up to the third case, mitzora. The hare mitzora duloksibe ela Torah. It only says the word Torah there, not huka. Vitnan, and the Mishnah says, Arba aminim shiba mitzora ma'akman zedzeh. There's four different things you bring with the mitzora. Yes,
purification of the mitzora.
Right. Yeah, so you have the 8 errors. You have the cedar wood, the shani tolas, and the hyssop, I don't pronounce it. Yeah, and you have the 2 birds.
Cedar, crimson thread.
Yeah. Cedar, crimson thread.
2 live birds.
2 live birds. Yeah. 8 errors, the shani tolas, the ezov, the tzipor. Those 4 are ma'akvan zedzeh. You have to bring all 4, or else he's not pure. And it only says Torah, not Chuka. Shiny Hassam, Kevin Exhibit. Zos Tihiyah, Torah Samatzor. Zos, this shall be. Zos, this, it shall be. Tihiyah, Torah Samatzor. Meaning, it shall be. Every detail has to be. Kiman Exhibit Chuka, dummy. That word Tihiyah makes up for the lack of the word Chuka, and also teaches you that it has to be this way. Okay, that's now case number 4, the Yud, in our Natatz Yakmal Simon. So now Hara Yoma Kippurim Delok Sive Ela Chuka. Now we go the other way. It only says Chuka by Yoma Kippurim. It says which be for you an eternal statute. So Vitnan, and we learn the Shnei Seir, the 2 he-goats on Yoma Kippurim, the Akvin Zadzeh, they prevent one another. So what do you see? It only says Chuka, and yet we see that these 2 he-goats, they both have to be brought. And if not, then they prevent, not brought, one is brought and one's thrown off the cliff. I think that's what we're talking about, right?
Essential to one another does not require scriptural mention of Torah. Rather, Rav means
the 2 ones, yeah. Right, so the 2 he-goats, one that you bring and one that's thrown off the cliff. So those 2, you have to have both. If you're missing one, and it's going to prevent the other one, the service from taking place. And it only says chuka. Okay, so now that now forced us to amend or to re-understand what Rav said. Ella o Torah o chuka. Either Torah or chuka are both words that tell you each thing is essential. If you don't do it, then it's a 0. So, yeah. I v'harei shar korbanos t'ksiv behu Torah v'lo makvi. The rest of the offerings, it says Torah, and we just had a whole Mishnah of a number of things. If you don't do them, so you should do them. If you don't do them, then it's going to be fine. And yet, by all the korbanos, it says Zos tia Torah hadis and Torah that. This is the category of the mincha, the chatos, the asham. And yet, not every detail in the parsha, if you don't do it, is not going to work. We just had, by the flour offering, we had oil, mixing, breaking bread, salting, waving, all those things. You should do it. If you don't do it, though, it's still good. So what do you mean that if it says Torah, it tells you it's a preventative? It's not true. So, yeah. So, says the Gemara, Torah bayi chuka. You're right. When it just says Torah, it needs the word chuka or something which is equal to it. But when it says v'chuka, when it says the word chuka, that's lo bayi Torah. It says chuka, that itself is enough. You don't need Torah. So the ha Torah v'chuka ka'amar. But Rav said Torah and chuka. Sounds like you need both. Amar no hachikamar. This is what he meant to say. Afal gav diksiv Torah, even though it says Torah. Iksiva chuka and vilolo. If it says chok, then good, and if not, not. I the hare mincha d'ksiv bechuka. By a mincha, this is why we brought this. Our flower offering, d'ksiv bechuka. It says chuka. The Omar Rav and Rav said, kol makom shehigzira kasav b'torah b'torah's mincha eino ela la'ake. Rav himself said that whenever you have a section of the flower offerings repeated, it's repeated because every detail that's repeated is absolutely essential. But it sounds like higzir in lo, higzir lo. It sounds like the only time that things are essential by flower offerings is if they're repeated, but not because it says chukah. Meaning, if it said chukah but it wasn't repeated, it wouldn't be essential. So, says the Gemara, that's not a disproof. Why? Shiny hasam, the chiksiva chukah achilaksiv. It says chukah regarding the eating, and that's not a preventative. However, yeah, this word says by a mincha chukah. It says it by where? By eating. They should eat it. So there, by that word chukah, that was referring to the eating, and the eating is different. The eating is not essential. However, the other details that are repeated, if those details are repeated, even if it doesn't say chukah, it's going to be essential. So that's still a question on Rav. It sounds like the repetition is what makes it essential and not chukah. Yeah, this idea that when it says chukah, when it's by eating, that's an exception. It's not essential. Hare lechem upon him. It says by the bread. I'll write the 12 loaves of bread that we bring, the show bread, whatever show bread means, that lechem upon him the chiksiva chukah ha'achila ksiva. It says chukah by eating, and it says over there, the Mishnah says v'tnan shnei sidar makman zedzeh. The two sections of the two loaves of the two shelves of bread prevent one another. You have to have all 12 of them. And the two frankincense, you got to bring both of those. It's essential. So you say chukah by eating is essential. Ella like this. When it says chukah by eating, it really goes on eating and the whole mincha offering. However, shiny hasam to Amar Kra, over here it's different because it says migarsha. Where's this pasuk? By yeah. Yeah, the reason why over there in that second chapter of Vayikra it says chukah, but it's not going to be essential, is because it says migarsha umishmena. From its oil and from its finely ground flour. It could have just said from oil or from flour. From the fact that it said from its oil and from its finely ground flour, so you see from there that if you're lacking anything, it's going to be invalid. But that's because it says it over there. So next page. Garush v'shemen ma'akrin v'ein davar acher ma'akev. Only the oil and the fine flour are going to be preventatives, but nothing else is going to be essential. So 1 second. So where are we holding this? So Rav said that basically if it says Torah, it needs chukah. If it says chukah, though, it doesn't need Torah to teach you that section is going to be essential. Fine. Then we said that Rav said that anytime the Torah repeats itself by a mincha offering, so that's what makes it essential, but not the word chukah. But not the word chukah. 1 second. Yeah, so the reason in that case, the Torah specifically stated that it has to be from its fine flour and from its oil. But therefore, you know that the word chuk over there wouldn't be enough to make it essential, because the Torah itself wrote that it has to be from its own, it has to be a full measurement of flour and a full measurement of oil to teach you that if it's lacking, it's not going to be good. So, but anywhere else where it's repeated, where this idea that you need oil and fine flour is repeated, so then it will be essential. But anything else will not be essential. So by oil and by flour, the Torah there specifies in the beginning of Vayikra that we need it to be from its oil, its fine flour, to teach you that it has to be a full measurement. And therefore, anytime its oil or its flour is repeated, it's going to be essential. But anything else which is repeated, if it doesn't say chukah, is not going to be essential. So really, Rav holds it's true. You need chukah to teach you that things are essential. We find by a flour offering that repetitions are essential. That's only by the oil and by the fine flour, because there the Torah specifically mentioned that we need to have its flour and its oil because if you're lacking any little bit, it's going to be invalid. To teach you that in that case, chukah is not what tells you that it's essential. What tells you it's essential is the fact that it repeated itself. Okay. Gufa, back to what we just said. Amarav, kol makom she'exer la chakasu b'toras mincha ein elo la'aked. So says Rav, anytime it's repeated by a flour offering, it means that it's essential. Shmuel Amar, Giresh Shemen ma'akin ein davar acher ma'aked. No, only oil and fine flour is going to be when it's repeated is essential, but other details in the flour world, if they're repeated, are not going to be essential. Now, Shmuel afal gav the tanabe kra lo ma'akvale. So we're asking on Shmuel now, is that true that when the Torah repeats itself, it's really not going to be essential? Ella kol heicha the tanabe kra vaday ma'akva. No, really, Shmuel agrees. Whenever things are repeated, it is going to be essential. What do they argue about over here? A very, very minute debate. Not a large debate, a very minute debate. There's going to be a contradiction that it says on the one hand you have to have a handful. It has to be the Tanya, the Bryce says, mole kumtza has to be a full amount of flour. That's one verse. That's mentioned in the second chapter of Vayikra by the section of the Mincha. And then it also states it by the later on it says v'kumtzo shlo yasem mida lakomets, that you cannot use a measuring cup for the komets. You have to use your hand. Yeah. So now, okay. So Rav Savar Hanami Tanabe Kra. This is also considered repetitious. Why? Dichsiv vayikra mincha vayimale kapo mimenu. It says, I think this is later on by the inauguration, that you bring a mincha vayimale kapo mimenu and you fill up your hand with it. So now that shows you that it's repetitious, that you have to use your hand, and then since it repeated it twice, that's essential. So now that's what Rav held. Shmuel held Doros Misha Lo Yalfinan. You don't learn out laws for generations from laws that are temporary. So the mincha is laws for generations. The inauguration was only a one-time thing. So we're not going to learn from there. So according to Shmuel, if you don't use your hand, it's still going to be valid? I think so. I think that's the debate. If you don't use your hand by knitza, is it valid or not? Right? Right, and then it repeats it. So Rav says it repeats it by the inauguration to teach you that you have to. It's essential. Shmuel says you don't learn from there. You can't learn from there. That's not considered repetitious. Now, says the Gemara, is that true? Shmuel really not learn things for generations from things that happened once? The Hatanam have a mission that says, Kli halak mekach nesalach. vessels that were used to measure out liquids, sanctify the liquids. Umidas yavish mikachin, that's a yavish. Vessels that are measured, that are used for measuring things that are dry, like flour, are sanctified the things that are dry. The ain clay alach mikachin, that's yavish. Velo midas yavish mikachin, that's alach. The measuring cups that measure the oil cannot sanctify the flour, and the measuring cups that do the flour cannot measure the oil. The Amar Shmuel said, Loshanu elamidos, aval mizrakos mikachin. That was by the measuring cups, but by these bowls, by the mizrakos, that even though that's used for the blood, that could sanctify even things that are dry. How do I know? The verse says, by when the Nisim brought the sacrifice, when the heads of the tribe brought all their sacrifices. So that was for the inauguration. That was a one-time thing, and it says there, Shnei Meluim Solas, that you're going to fill them up with flour, the things that were used for the blood. So we see Shmuel's learning from the inauguration when the tribe brought the sacrifices to teach you that forever in the base of Mikdash, the bowls that hold the blood could sanctify the flour. So he does hold of this principle. Shiny Hassan, the time to bake broad, tracers him. Yeah, it's a big difference though. Over there, it repeated the same thing 12 times. So that breaks the rules. Once it's repeated 12 times, so then you could learn for all future generations. So, Rav Kahana Rav Asi l'Rab. Now, Rav Kahana and Rav Asi said to Rab, the Harei Hagasha, bringing the flour to the southwest corner of the altar, the Tana Bakra, Vilo Ma'akva. It repeated itself, and it's not essential. If you don't do it on that southwest corner, it's still going to be valid. Now, I'm going to bring out the picture books from Zvachim, yeah? Because Mantanabe, so who's the author of this? The Chsiv, Zos Torah Mincha. Hikriv Osa B'nei Aaron Lifnei Hashem. So the requirement of the mincha is to bring it before Hashem. Now just remember that when you walk into the base of Mikdash, so you're walking in from east to west, right? As you're walking straight, that's east to west. The end of at the most western part is the Holy of Holies. On your left side, which is the south, is the altar. Right now, the altar, we know it's a debate, but was positioned either directly, facing the east, or it was really all the way in the south. So now, lift before Hashem means before the west, on the western side. So, Lifnei Hashem hahu likvola makom hu asa. It said Lifnei Hashem to teach you the place that it has to be. The Tanya, as it says Lifnei Hashem, it says you should bring the mincha before Hashem. Yochol b'mariv, you would think to bring it on the west part of the altar. But the problem is Kamalomer el Pnei HaMizrach. It says you should bring it facing the face of the altar. Now the face of the altar is really towards the north, towards the south, not the west. Right, the face of the altar, the ramp is even more south. Right? A little picture. You have the altar that's in the south, and more south is the ramp, but that's how you go up to the altar. To the mizbeach. So on the one hand, you have it has to be Lifnei Hashem, which is on the west of the altar. On the other hand, it has to be on the south of the altar. So you unify it just on the face of the altar, meaning the front of the altar is the front to the south. Lifnei Hashem, but it says before Hashem, it has to be on the west. So how do you do it? What do you do? Magisha v'keren dromis ma'aravis kineged chuda shel keren v'dayo. You're going to bring the offering to the southwest corner, right by that horn, by the edge, and that's enough because that's going to suffice for both. You have the west and you have the south. You got both requirements in. Let's stop here. It's a new part of a. Okay.